Hello, it's Doishi here for another cheeky little Doomsday League review, and today I am joined by the absolutely stupendous Wonderpreaux. Wonderpreaux, thank you very much for joining me on this.
Hi, that sounded fun, so here I am. We're gonna go over some games. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. So, Wonder, for those of you at home who do not, for the people at home who don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit about yourself and your sort of legacy/Doomsday background?
Sure, yeah. I started playing Legacy about 8 years ago, plus or minus a few breaks that lasted several years. I played Ad Nauseam Tendrils, and then TES, and then Reanimator, and now Doomsday. I'll basically register anything with Dark Rituals in it.
That's a line I can respect quite heartedly. And what is it about sort of modern Doomsday that kind of has appealed over, say, the other alternatives as time has gone on?
I'm pretty sure it's just the best combo deck that, of the decks you'd register that included Dark Ritual, Doomsday is probably the best of them. Thassa's Oracle is just really overpowered as a win condition. There was a time where Ethan Formicella, the other really good Doomsday player, was playing this list back in 2019, 2020 or something. He was just years ahead of everyone, and I was still grinding out matches with Ant and just ignoring it for no really justifiable reason. I can only imagine where I'd be now if I'd started a year earlier on this deck.
Yeah, for those at your home, Ethan is known as Monkeys Can't Cry on MTGO/ on Twitter, and he has joined me before for one of these videos. And yeah, he is an excellent player and was definitely one of the people who first picked up sort of on the shell, or the ideas of the shell when Thassa's Oracle got first spoiled, whereas others like myself were a little bit distracted playing around with Underworld Breach to take proper notice of it. So, we'll have a quick look, as usual, at the deck list. So I did lie a little bit on my last video with Revenant Kyoku. I had, in fact, made one change since the last set of videos I did with this, which was very small, which is why I kind of forgot about it, which is just replacing a 4th Forcer Negation with the 2nd Flusterstorm, because, there's actually very few matches where you really want all 4 Fons, I think. Yeah. So, Wonder, what are your thoughts when you sort of see this sort of list? What is it similar to what you play at the moment, or do you have a different style that you prefer?
Looking this over, I'd say there's maybe about a dozen cards difference between the 75 I'm currently playing and this one. None of these cards seem particularly unreasonable. I've seen these all come up in other people's lists before, right? This seems vaguely in the ballpark of what people would run.
Yeah. But what are those differences that tune it to the direction that you prefer?
In general, I'd say the biggest difference is that I just don't play red. I play strictly blue-black and have been for about something like 10-ish months. The fundamental issues that I see are that Volcanic Island doesn't cast Darkrit and Badlands doesn't cast Thassa's Oracle, and neither of those cards are basics, so you're cutting yourself off your ability to play blue and black, and you're still getting hit by Wasteland. I think Wasteland has an incredibly outsized impact on all the games where it's used, whether you're playing it or playing against it. More than that, it's really important to be able to keep up a consistent flow of blue or black spells. When he was Ziggy Stardust, when his Jeskai Hullbreacher deck, or no, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was Zio Franconi. One of those blue deck players.
Yeah.
First, the Jeskai Hullbreacher list, and it became really popular. I tried Grixis again after being off of it for about 6 months or something like that, to figure, okay, people are just going to be main decking a bunch of Hullbreachers, a bunch of Days Undoings. Maybe this is the time to actually register Red Elemental Blast. And I still hated it. It was still bad. I still opened Volcanic Island plus Darkrit and just wondered what I was doing with my life. It was a really bad experience. And now, never again. There are, some things you lose out on when you're not playing tertiary colors. I won't say like there aren't good cards in tertiary colors. White, green, and red all have a lot of great cards to offer, but you don't literally always draw Dark Ritual. You don't always hit your land 2, so on and so forth. There's also like weird situations where the blue-black shell actually ends up being better. For example, against 8-cast, the Mystical Disputes, which seem like usually worse than Pyroblast across the board, actually are, contextually better because they operate through a Chalice on one.
Yeah.
There's little things like that. On smaller, there are smaller things here. Like I'm an advocate of Double Thassa's Oracle Meandeck. I think that card is really underutilized and undervalued. He and Bound and Pact of Negation compete for slots in my 75, but neither would be in the main deck before the second Oracle. I'm also a big fan of Leylines over Surgical Extractions and Tormod's Crypts.
Is that the full 4, or would you be sort of one of those who maybe only do like 2 Leylines?
I do 2, so I have maybe the same number of Graveyard Hate cards as you. It's just they're Leylines instead.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I out of everything in this list, I think the red splash is the thing I've most considered cutting, just because either it's been not necessarily it's either it's been not relevant, or sort of when it has been relevant, as you say, it has really impacted on my mana decisions because I haven't got the bad lands in the list, and so I've needed to hold it up, say for turn 2. To try and get rid of a threat or oppose something, and then turn 3 I want to be hitting that 3rd land drop and just making triple black, which I'm not able to do. So I have been looking at those slots as the first ones maybe to tinker with going forwards.
Yeah, there is kind of a hack you can do with that, where when you have Cabal rituals, they can be your Dark Ritual, 5 or 6, or maybe 5, 6, and 7. So when you open Island into Tutor, or you open Volcanic Island to hold up your Pyroblast, you can still color convert.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary on like how well that works. If you're intending to hold up the Red Elemental Blast, right? Because you might actually have to fully tap down. But with Red Elemental Blast, since it has the destroy effect, you can at least come back later after you've cast the Doomsday. Whereas with Dispute, if you tap down and you miss their Narset drop or something, you're just kind of committed to playing through it.
Yeah. And definitely, I've said before, but I'm definitely intrigued in trying to play maybe give a go at some of these lists with either Cabal Ritual and or Misdirection, and I might try that at F&M next week, which is coming up, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, any final sort of questions or discussion you want to go about sort of this list, or just Doomsday lists in general at the moment, or should we move on to the games?
I do get like pretty opinionated about the list, but like I said, I've seen all of these cards, appearing in lists before. I don't think there's unless you're caring quite a lot about optimizing the list. I don't have any like major gripes with any of these lists that I see people play. I think they're all like pretty solid.
Yeah.
The one thing I would highlight, I guess from like a theory craft perspective, just because like these things are interesting to consider, is that cards like Leyline, I think, are kind of interesting graveyard hate effects because the Black-Red Reanimator player comes prepared to beat stack-based interaction. They have, 8 to 10 discard effects. They have their Chancellor. So Leyline, being something that doesn't use the stack, like Surgical, attacks them from a different angle. However, Doomsday is a mass tutor effect, so the idea that you can slide in a Tormod's Crypt or a Surgical into your pile and then cycle into it is a really interesting interaction.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of give and take, where both of these options are good for different reasons. Like Leyline is more strictly raw power against the matchup, whereas Surgical and Tormod give you interesting ways of interfacing with how your deck actually plays. Like I think things like that are really intriguing to consider. Like I think Leyline is probably better, but I think the difference is very close.
Would you ever consider doing something maybe like if you still wanted only sort of 2 copies of graveyard-based interaction on your board, would you ever consider doing maybe 1 leyline, 1 crypt?
I think I would consider cards like Surgical or Tormod's Crypt if I only had room for 1 slot, because like random ley lines are a bit harder to manage. And when I'm down to 1 anyway, I think the utility of putting something in the Doomsday pile starts to matter more. So I think things like that are really interesting. People also like bringing Surgical in, again, in combo mirrors.
Yes.
I think that's somewhat overrated, but if the boarding works out, and that might be the reason why I only have 1 slot for like a Surgical type effect, is that it's also not just my Reanimator or Oops type of slot, it's also a thing I bring in against Show and Tell, because my sideboard space is taken up by other things like anti-creature cards or anti-Delver tech or something like that.
Yeah.
I could see something like that. I think that'd be really good.
Okay, cool. Right then, let's have a look then and zoom forwards to getting into the league. So I think, as with a lot of my leagues, this was sort of after work, maybe quite late at night. It might have been 10 o'clock in the evening. So that's the excuse I've got for any horrendous misplays that do occur.
That's perfectly fine. For me, the biggest issue playing, like Sunday challenges or something, is that they're 8 a.m. my time, so it's not until about round 3 when I feel like vaguely functional, and by then, whether I'm on a decent run or not has already been decided.
But they do say that people's brains function best first thing in the morning, so just after you've woken up. So in theory, it should be a sort of optimal time for you.
A very interesting theory.
Okay, so round 1, we're on the play. What do you think of this, Seven?
We're on the play. I feel like this is actually like kind of close. The problem is that I think one of the better things you could do here is Lotus Petal Brainstorm, and at that point you're basically mulligan. So I'd rather just hit the mulligan button.
Yeah, I think for me this has none of our combo pieces, no kind of solid protection. I mean, you could argue Daze is decent protection, but not really. And Brainstorm, in my head, if I'm burning Petal onto Brain, it's not a play I like to do unless I'm like 1 card away from winning, if you get what I mean.
Yeah,
so
usually I like being about 1 cantrip away from a turn 2 Doomsday, but if the setup is 2 cantrips, I can go turn 1 cantrip, turn 2 fix the hand, and then try it, which is why we probably have to Petal Brainstorm here. Yeah, and like at that point, you may, because like the rest of this supporting cast in your hand, like dazes are fine when you're on low land counts. Like if you have like 2 or 3 dazes, you can just replay the same land 3 or 4 times if you're low on land. I've done that in some matches and it looks really janky, but I mean, if the dazes are all connecting, then I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
It just does seem like we have a very awkward looking hand though.
Yeah, and I think I do mulligan this to this 6. What are your thoughts on this?
I do like this better. I mean, we are, again, like about a cantrip away from a turn 2 Doomsday, and you even have a second cantrip if your Preordain doesn't pan out. This is one of those cases where I think a Personal Tutor would be, like a full 4 of them over the Preordains would make this hand a lot better, because in this case, we would have, like, what is this? It would be a guaranteed turn 2, because we'd Personal Tutor for Doomsday, then go Darker Doomsday, Street Wraith into Petal, Brainstorm.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. But yeah.
I think in this case, it's probably fine to just keep, you can bottom either Dark Rit or Cavern.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So I, in fact, pretty much always will cycle a Street Wraith immediately in the hopes of that Doomsday off the top. But failing
that...
I
think that's fine here with a Preordain, because you want to maximize you actually get there. You also have a Brainstorm, so if you hit a fetch, the triple Dark Rit stops being as bad.
Yeah, and did you notice that we actually bottomed another Dark Rit with the Preordain as well?
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. That's a good matchup to hit at least.
It's a very good matchup to hit. And we do find the fetch, so we can get some good use out of these rituals to turn into other things. Unless we draw, of course, complete blanks.
I think I would have liked keeping the land over the other dark red.
Oh, okay.
Because one of the better things you can do in this matchup, just like they have so few live cards against you anyways, like you probably just Thoughtseize the one live card they have. But
Yeah.
one of the better things you can do here is Doomsday pass with many lands so that you can untap and then Ideas Unbound into land Oracle, because then their endurance would only put 2 cards back, and so you can cycle and then you win anyways.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to use Petals to play your Oracle, it's more cards to send back. So hitting like land 4 is weirdly good against this deck.
Thankfully, we do find Doomsday off the top on turn 3, and so we can cast it on route. And I do decide to just burn a ritual here to keep a fetch available.
I think that's fine. You can stuff lands into your pile to play around Boseiju, and also it's an unexpected way to keep your deck count modulated against an endurance. So like you don't have a cycler in your hand, but you do have a pseudo cycler effect on the board. And these dark rituals don't actually do a lot for you. I think one of the things that people underestimate when they play out these hands is that they often come down to things that look like all-ins, like you're playing like black-red or something.
Yeah.
Like you have a bunch of forces and dazes, but you're not actually like a control deck. So being able to just burn a bunch of rituals to invalidate a daze on your fundamental turn, or to keep your lands up like this so you can do different things with your fetch lands, I think that pays a bigger dividend than being able to just hold an extra dark red in your hand that doesn't do anything.
Now I'm just going to quickly touch on something you said just a moment before. Pause on this expedition map activation. So you obviously mentioned a newer card from sort of the latest set, Boseiju. Now I will 100% admit I had forgotten that this was a card. So when I was building this pile, that wasn't on my radar, and I believe what they're about to find off this map is in fact Boseiju.
Yeah, it's kind of an obnoxious kind of incidental thing, where decks like Elves or Cloudpost or I think even Ant has it,
Yeah.
and they'll just try to like wasteland-ish you because you've collapsed your deck into 5 cards, and they're probably not going to be lands. So.
Yeah, and it was funny because when it was first spoiled, I actually mentioned this interaction as something that we do need to be aware of as an archetype. So here, there's a interesting decision to make here as to whether you actually, go and fetch a land with the card here, because we know the order of our deck currently, but if we were to go and fetch the island from it, we would no longer have that sort of knowledge. It would go into a random order. So do you think there's a benefit to searching or not searching either way?
Just to refresh my memory, the 4 cards in our deck are Ideas Unbound, Oracle, Island, and what is the other card?
Cavern and Pact of Negation.
Cavern and Pact of Negation. Okay. I would search the island because I'm kind of okay with the idea of slow drawing in these cases.
Yeah.
Particularly because if we just slow draw the pile and go Cavern Oracle, if the opponent tries to endurance us, we can use the Scalding Tarn to fetch the Underground Sea that gets sent back into our deck.
Yeah, that's true. We also, if we draw, say, just the Pact or just the Ideas Unbound, we have, for the Ideas Unbound, we have the option to sort of cycle it through the pile a little bit, and discard, the Dark Ritual, the Force of Will, and just make sure we keep enough cards to retain Oracle in our hand. Or we could just pitch them to Force if they play something that actually matters, which, as we said, is very few cards.
Right. I think at most you might have to perhaps force like a prime time or something. Because
Yeah.
they have a once upon a time that might hit a cavern, but probably not. I think I would search here, but let's see what we end up doing.
I do in fact end up searching. We draw a bit of a dud of cavern, but that's fine.
Yeah. We're just stuck for the moment. Unfortunately, we can't do anything neat like Dark Writ Force of Will.
No. And awkwardly, we're now at the point where, because we've taken out the island from the deck, if we draw Ideas Unbound, we can't use it to, you know, cycle into the rest of the deck. And this prime time now is looking awfully dangerous.
To be fair, it looks like we hit the worst draw RNG though, because you drew the non-blue, non-oracle card. Oh, hey, that is a blue and oracle card. Okay, so it seems like we're in a solid spot now.
Yeah. And at this point, I don't think it's worth worrying about a potential second endurance here. So boarding, it's pretty much, you know, bring in cards that I'm never too sure how much Cloudpost decks actually run like other permanent-based interaction, like spheres or similar. But I basically assume that whatever they're doing will be, you know, permanent-based unless it's endurances, and otherwise just bring in second oracle for the sake of that, and a bounce spell just in case something does resolve that's awkward.
Yeah, I think the largest dynamic post-board against Cloudpost is they go from having, you know, one card with text against you to like 4 cards of text, and then 2 to 4 cards that have text. Like Mind Ring Trap isn't that hard to play around. But the big dynamic is how do you play around Cavern of Souls Endurance, because that's the big thing they should be doing against you.
Yeah.
Ideas Unbound is really good against that. 2 Oracles is really good against that. Chain of Vapor, your own Thassa's Oracle, is really good against that. The one thing I will point out is that you took out a Duress and a Street Wraith and Preordains to keep Dazes, and I don't think that that's worthwhile. I don't think your Dazes should ever connect against a Cloudpost player in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Right, whereas being able to recruit a Duress is like pretty okay. It hits their Green Sun Zeniths, it hits their Mind Break Traps, it's, you know, fine. And then the Preordains, I think they're serviceable. Like, I wouldn't cut Personal Tutors against this matchup, and your Preordains are in the Personal Tutor slots from, you know, how I look at it, so I feel like you'd want to be keeping those.
Okay. Although on that subject, I did have an amusing, this was sort of, I think last year, an amusing in-paper game against a Cloudpost player who at one point tapped out for what would have been a lethal Walking Blister post-Doomsday, and snagging that with a Daze after they had sort of sunk 8 to 10 mana into it was pretty good feeling. So, on the draw, game 2, this is our 7. What are you thinking?
I think this is fine. You know, we have a good shot at maybe hitting a Dark Ritual for a turn 2 Doomsday. I would settle for turn 3 because you're showing the lands for it, and you even have a Cycler as sort of like a kicker on top of all that. Force of Will is like pretty decent. Like I mentioned, the big dynamic after your Doomsday is probably going to be a Caverned Endurance or like a Boseiju, so the Force of Will won't be that great against all of those, but it does keep you from just dying to like a Green Sun Zenith or like a particularly threatening green creature, I guess. So this hand seems really good.
Yeah, and I'm pretty happy to just snap keep that. So they do start off with the Blind Needle. And I think most of the time, yeah, I would expect this to name Street Wraith unless they really want to play the Polluted Delta Lottery. And we get rewarded quite nicely with this Lotus Petal, because this obviously sets us up ready for a turn 2 as opposed to a turn 3. So here I think I elect to Doomsday off Petal Watery Grave, and again, similar to the game 1, hold up this fetch as an available tool post Doomsday.
Yeah, I like that because you'd be at 9 life either way, so you get to get the larger decrement set before your Doomsday. And again, the Misty Rainforest has a lot of utility. You can pick up lands from your pile, you can get a Sage Root and then Endurance and just pick up the land. I think a slow draw pile that just bullies them with Oracles over and over is probably fine. I feel like Cavern of Souls should have made it out of our deck at some point. It doesn't do
Possibly.
anything.
I'm always a little bit wary of the deck that can make Chalice on 2 quite easily. That they might bring that in as a tool. As I said, I'm not too familiar with the types of hate they commonly bring in. And in my eyes, it's a pretty free card to keep in as a just in case. So the way I stacked my pile was a bit different to how I normally would, I think, in this situation, because specifically we have this Edge, the Fetch, and the Brainstorm in hand. So I actually elected to put an Oracle on top of the deck, which wouldn't normally be the case, but we've got a shot at being able to utilise the fetchable land in the deck, plus we've got the Pact of Negation on top to be able to sort of get it to a scenario where we can try and go off this turn with Pact backup, or simply try and go off, wait a bit.
Yeah, I think you could probably afford to take it slower because the opponent is representing so few green sources. So it's not like they can hard cast Endurance. They'd have to be spewing out their whole hand to double Endurance to you.
Yeah.
But by that same token, right, because they're showing so few green sources, it's actually really hard for them to interact with you just going for it that turn. So I feel like it's probably kind of fine either way.
So, match 2. On the draw this time, and we see this, I can only describe as absolutely horrendous 7. This consider needs to do a lot of work to make this hand playable.
Yeah, I'd probably throw this back unless I knew it was still Cloudpost. Is it still Cloudpost?
You'd keep this against Cloudpost?
I've kept worse hands against Cloudpost and still won. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think Cloudpost is definitely the best matchup we could come across, I think, in the format. Yeah. So we see this 6. I personally, as much as I've notoriously kept a lot of no-land hands, I don't think this falls into the remit of what I'd consider to be keepable.
Nah, you probably have to send this one back. It's close-ish in this. Oh wow, okay, I guess we're going to 4. Yeah, I don't know. This just kind of isn't going too well.
No. And to be fair, I think this is the first time I've had such bad RNG in my opening hands, and I in fact take it all the way down to 2. Because at this point, like, if we're not keeping anything that can let us play the game, at the very least, this hand has cards. It has got a win conditioning and a card that can draw into another card if we're wanting to play the game. But at that same token, you know, we're not likely to be playing the game at all with this hand. So it might just be that, you know, game 1 is to get information, and then we come out with the, you know, all things blazing, all things swinging in game 2. And our opponent is lamenting. Oh yeah, we keep 3, not 2. Keep 3.
Yeah, I mean, of the 3, these are the ones I would keep. You do have to take like a high variance line here, and you could conceivably land Wraith into a Dark Ritual, something like that.
Yeah. So what I do is I elect to not play anything here because, funnily enough, if we can find like land ritual, then we're in a pretty good spot. And it turns out we are against the old 8 mulch lands deck. So
yeah, I mean, of the way to play out of this, I think you zeroed in on the best path here, which is, you know, as it sounds, just like get a little lucky because you got very unlucky at the start.
Yeah, I think it would have been an interesting decision if I had had my opponent say go like turn 1 Thoughtseize me, as to whether I would, you know, consider just scooping there and then or not.
I would probably concede.
Yeah.
What I like here is that we're only a Dark Ritual away from winning. You would just build a Brainstorm pile, cycle into another Petal, Brainstorm, put back, you know, Days, consider LED Cycle, consider Mill Days, play Oracle. So, you know, even though you're in a multi 3, just because of the particular context of this matchup, you're actually very close to winning. You're on a 4 outer, which is actually way better than most other decks on a multi 3.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that sort of our opponent does finally find this Thespian stage, and this land is not helpful. So I decided to scoop it up there because we'd be dead the next turn anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's some like 1% like Petal Brainstorm that gets you there, but I think you actually retain more value by keeping them from knowing whatever it is you're on.
Now, there's an interesting... so I haven't really looked up the 8 mulch list at all. I know Traditional Lands has been running sort of red effects as part of their toolbox. Does the mulch deck run red as well, or is it just strictly green-black?
The last I've seen, they're running this particular complement of, I think it's like Pyroblast effects and Collector Oops, like 4 Oops, which is kind of hilarious. This is another matchup where I think Days is, you know, really low value because the opponent just plays like, you know, 8 lands and then casts a 2-mana spell every turn.
Yeah.
I feel like their random oops and stuff are kind of interesting, but probably not as good as the land sideboard of just bringing in like a dozen cards that matter against Doomsday.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've got at least semi-perfect information of our opponent's deck, and our opponent doesn't know what we're on at all, having seen 0 cards from us. So, what do you think of this 7?
I think this is fine. We will probably, you know, lead off on the pond or something like that. Brainstorm likely puts away our LEDs. Best card we can find is Dark Red, but this seems fine.
Yeah, I agree.
While these lands type decks don't actually have like a Force of Will or anything, I don't think you have to hard mull for something like Dark Red Doomsday. I mentioned this earlier, but I think something like one cantrip away from a turn 2 is fine, and in this case we have 2 really good cantrips to help put it together. And if this ponder even sees a petal, right, then you're also there. So you have a wide range of hits.
So our opponent mentions here that they had put us on oops, based on our unfortunate mulliganing and lack of play.
Well, you play an Oracle, and a lot of your deck does get taken out of the deck. It's kind of like oops all spells. I did say this deck kind of plays a lot of all-ins. It's honestly not that far from oops all spells.
Yeah. So ponder sees fetch C consider. Would you think about keeping this or shuffling it away?
I would shuffle this away. None of those cards are good.
So it looks like I elected to keep it.
Hit Dark Ritual, and I was pretty adamant about that. I would have sent anything that wasn't a Dark Ritual away in all likelihood. I would have settled for like Petal plus like another good card though.
Yeah.
Like Petal, Oracle, whatever. I probably would have kept.
Okay.
Now we're drawing through a fair number of like mundane cards, and the opponent wastelanded us, but that's not even really slowing them down because they open on the exploration.
Yeah. Was there be some consideration to funning the exploration at all, do you think?
Did we have the consider?
We had the brainstorm in hand, but not the consider.
Okay. I feel like we maybe should have stacked it so we would have had the consider to pitch, because I don't think you can afford to pitch a brainstorm on an exploration.
So opponent cast this Mana Bond, which is quite a scary card, to be honest. I think scarier than Exploration is.
So out of curiosity, why did you lead on the brainstorm instead of the consider?
Because I think I wanted to pitch consider. I would rather a pitch consider than brainstorm here. It's not like, looking back at it now, it's not a very good line, I don't think. So if I was going to pitch a card, I probably should have just like done it there and then, maybe, and just then saw what we were drawing afterwards.
Right. I feel like we're running into the problem here where we kept the ponder that didn't have the acceleration, and now we're getting choked on the lack of mana because we have no petals and dark roots. I think this is like an illustrative game, but maybe one we're not winning, unfortunately.
So, okay, what would you sort of put back with this brainstorm then?
So we have the second Oracle in, right?
We do have the second Oracle in, yes.
Okay. So, I think what we'll probably end up doing is some kind of setup where the Consider can at least mill one of these 2 Doomsdays. I see the Surgical there. Like, I understand that that's a possibility that can happen. These Surgical are doing nothing for us.
Yeah.
I want to be able to possibly, like, Street Race into an Accelerant. So I'm willing to accept that, like, well, I guess you could play it, like, super safe and have Consider mill the LED. But, I don't know if that's much better. I would probably put like Doomsday as a card that can get milled by the Consider so that we can see fresh cards off the Wraith.
Yeah.
And then like whatever's not getting milled by the Consider doesn't quite matter. I think maybe it'd be like an LED or something on the off chance that we get Surgical, because then you're holding the Doomsday and all the blue cards and the land, something like that.
Okay. So there is another line that we could take here, to do with LED and Doomsdays on top of our deck. Would you ever consider that?
You could set up like cycle into Doomsday. I'm not sure that I like that, because then we have no like other resources. I think the best way you could do that would maybe be something like, because do have a draw step, which makes it awkward because we're putting 2 cards back and we're drawing one of them.
Yeah.
And I think one of the better things we could do would be maybe try to set it so that we get to pick up the Doomsday and the Oracle. So when we Doomsday, we're also holding the Oracle. We're in the opponent's main phase, not ours.
Yeah. Okay.
Suppose if you were going to go for that angle, though, we'd go like Doomsday, and then maybe just Force of Negation the Mana Bond, because we're going to lose all the cards in our hand anyways.
Yeah.
Is that where we end up going?
It is, yeah. So we, in fact, Force of Negation pitching the Oracle on the Mana Bond, because what I had in mind was then I'd be using this LED to cast Doomsday and utilising Street Wraith and Consider to be able to at least obtain 1 extra card post Doomsday.
I like this because then when you're discarding your Oracle to the LED, you're not risking. So you get blown out by Surgical anyways because you're discarding 1 Doomsday to do this to draw the other one. So
yeah.
they Surgical.
Yeah,
like
so Surgical still hurts you quite a lot.
I feel like maybe we should have. I think it's close. You have Pact of Negation in your deck, so I guess you have backup for your 1 Oracle. So that's kind of fine. So we put it on the stack like Consider in response Street Wraith, in response Crack for Black, because then Consider gets to give us an extra Surveil on whatever our unknown card is in addition to the Doomsday.
Yep, exactly. So that's how we go. And this is me furiously making sure I'm holding the control button. Nice and hard.
My mouse is currently like, I don't know if it's broken or if I just haven't like cleaned it enough, but the right click does not work about 20% of the time, which makes every Lands on Diamond line like particularly interesting from a dexterity standpoint. Oh, hey.
I know, yeah, this is a spicy one. So we actually get the perfect, I would say the perfect card afterwards. And now we need to sort of have a think as to what we're playing around. So obviously lands, they can bring in, they could have Wasteland, they could have double Wasteland in fact off this exploration. They could have obviously endurance, they could have all manner of things. So we need to try and work out how do we get around what they're doing, and that starts off with either trying to risk it that Ideas Unbound can be cast, or just trying to emphasize a resilient pile with double blue available.
Right. And then, again, like from the last list of these, I saw the sideboarding plan was something like a bunch of Oops and a bunch of Pyroblasts. So this would have been a good time for the Cavern. I think the pile I would have made maybe would have been something like Wraith, Fetch, Land, Pack. That you have extra resilience against Boseijus and Wastelands, but you have Pack backup for their like 1-up cards. But if they just spew all their lands and represented depths, you can just the same turn cycle Fetch. You're down to 2 cards and immediately slam the Oracle. So if they challenge you with depths, you can push right back. But if you have the time, you can instead wait until you have the Pack.
Yeah. And I built something a little bit interesting here. It has the Ideas Unbound in case the opponent doesn't somehow Wasteland us, which is very, very unlikely. And it's got the ability to make blue even through a double Wasteland or Wasteland loop through Island Petal.
Right. What I think would have me skipping the Ideas Unbound, because like I mentioned, I think my pile would be something like Cycle, Fetch, Pact, Land.
Yeah.
That this pile runs afoul of their Rebs and their Collector Oops because we have a Petal. So we're kind of bogged down a lot by what they're just doing here.
Yeah. Thankfully, though, after that first Wasteland, they seem to mostly be casting mill threes. Although they do find depths and stage here. But we had built it so it's Street Wraith next, I believe, followed by a blue source, so we have the ability to just try and go for it now. And pray that Endurance doesn't turn up. And we get lucky. And I think what's important to note is actually the ordering of any pile where you have Ideas Unbound in is, I don't think, something that gets discussed that often, but when you've got, so in this instance, like when you've got only one oracle available to you, it's really interesting to think where you put the oracle within the pile, because if you think that your Ideas Unbound is not going to be available, but you need the oracle as quickly as possible, it should always go in probably the third slot, or at least the ability to cast the oracle by the third slot, because that's the earliest point where your oracle can win the game with 2 cards left in deck. But if you think that maybe you're doing an Ideas Unbound pile that involves a Lotus Petal, and that your Lotus Petal might be countered, so the Ideas Unbound might resolve, but your Lotus Petal might no longer function, then you then have to sort of think about, do you want the oracle in the final slot, the 5th slot of the pile, because then you can Ideas Unbound, drop any lands that you want, discard without fear of discarding the oracle, to then untap and cast it the next turn.
Yeah, I think you're correct. Oracle spot, so to speak, is usually like slot 3 or slot 5. Slot 5 also plays around Dress Down in response to Ideas Unbound.
Yeah. So, game 3. This is our 7. It's an interesting one.
Oh, I don't know about interesting. It only does one thing, but I'd keep it.
Well, it does one thing, but does it multiple times.
I mean, the first Doomsday is probably good enough, but yeah, I would keep this. This is turn 2 Doomsday.
Yeah. It's turn 2 Doomsday, followed by turn 3 Doomsday, if for whatever reason the lands player suddenly decides to bring in Force of Will.
Right. I wouldn't be too worried about that. Also, this has the same thing I mentioned against the green post player, where you have enough lands that you can just play an Ideas Unbound, pick up everything, and then cast your oracle.
Yeah. So this Ufe makes it a little bit awkward, just slows us down a slight bit, until we draw the Dark Ritual.
So I kind of like the idea of playing the Watery Grave here, because again, like, we'd be at 9 either way, but you get to keep your fetch land uncracked.
So I can't remember why I fetch both this time around.
Well, it's free to do that, because you'd be at 9 either way, so it conserves the life. Mechanically, this is correct. I just like the Water Grave because we'd also be at 9 life, but you get to put more lands into your pile.
Yeah.
So you get to out your pile without using draw effects that get hit by Reb, and you get to conserve life points while like guarding against their mana denial, because you have more lands totaling your pile when they're presenting Oof plus Wasteland.
Yeah. So here we've got an additional blue source in our hand in form of the Water Grave, an additional draw into pile / blue source in the form of the Delta, which can get this island, and we've got a couple of spare cards that are a bit useless in the Petal and the other Doomsday, well, and the Force, I guess, at this point. So I build something that again has the potential to easily cast an Oracle next turn, and then, you know, a second Oracle again on top of that.
Yeah. I think that's more than fair. One thing we could have looked into, I think, would be Chain of Vapor, because it more or less puts us on never dead to like rush Dark Depths territory. Also, it's effectively mana neutral because at any given point you could just chain the Ook, which unlocks the petal, which then puts you mana neutral.
Yeah. So here I think they go for a second Wasteland, which is pretty good for us because we've got nothing but mana.
And this brainstorm that we pick up, or rather the street wraith that leads to the brainstorm, can be a pitch card to force, which is like kind of fine. You can just slowly meander your way into runner oracles.
And we need to be careful at this point because we're pretty much now at the point where we're not casting Brainstorm, because with 4 cards left, if we were to cycle Wraith, fetch Delta, we would have not enough cards. So here what I'm doing is just getting the shuffle so that instead of drawing Brainstorm, we've got a 2/3 chance to draw an Oracle. And we've also now got... we unfortunately can't cycle Street Wraith into a blue card if they do have an Endurance. So this is a bit of a Hail Mary.
It's fine. It's not as bad as it looks because you now have a blocker for their attacker. And if they do Endurance you, they're putting back a bunch of lands. So they can't... So the Wastelands they put back in their hand can't stop you from casting the other Oracle.
Yeah.
So it would have mostly worked out.
So yeah, we managed to pick up a second win, which is nice, despite that unfortunate game 1.
Yeah.
Again, probably a favourable matchup, I'd say.
Yeah.
So let's jump ahead to match number 3. So on the play, this is the 7 we're presented. It's not like it's a fine 7, but it's not super exciting.
Yeah, it's like passable. I mean, you just want your Ponder to hit the Doomsday, and then you can cast it turn 2. You'll have Force backup. You'll have an Edge of Autumn. I don't like cantrip keeps because your cantrip can miss.
Yeah.
But of a cantrip keep, this is really strong because it has just about everything else you could ask a hand to have. It has, an edge, it has resilient mana, it has counter backups. I would probably keep this, but with the understanding that the Ponder isn't even like 50% to get you there.
Oh no, sorry, that was the 6. Sorry, I jumped ahead a bit too far. Here we go. So that was the 7.
Yeah, I probably would have sent this back too because this isn't even turn 2 Doomsday, right? Because you have to hit land plus Doomsday or ritual plus Doomsday, and that's asking a lot out of one cantrip. And like I mentioned, one cantrip actually doesn't get there like above 50% of the time. So I think throwing this back for 6 is fine. And at the 6, that like the hand you just showed us as a 6 is fine as well.
Yeah, because edge is not really a card. It is, but it isn't.
Like I mentioned, I like turn 2 Doomsday with other stuff, and the cantrips are very good, but the standards loosen the fewer cards you have, so at a certain point you do have to keep your hand.
Yeah.
This is a fine 6. It was a passable 7 and like a fine 6 now. Again, we really just want this Ponder to hit Doomsday though.
Which it does not. So we shuffle it. Get, I guess, rewarded with another Ponder? I'm not sure. It's not the worst we could draw.
Yeah, I would love a draw step Dark Ritter Doomsday, and then Ponder finds whatever the other thing is.
So opponent leads off Basic Island, which to me probably screams a control deck. So here, there might be some temptation on seeing the island to draw the duress off Ponder, fetch, and duress them. What would you say to that as a line?
None of those cards said Doomsday, so I would shuffle.
Fair enough. That's what we do.
I do understand the concept of like, oh, like it's a blue deck, I want protection for, you know, my combo, but you don't have a combo. Conceivably, you can beat a control player without your discard spells, without your counter magic, but you don't beat any player ever without whatever it is your combo deck does. So, Duress, yeah, good card against island opponents, generally speaking, but you know, we just have bigger priorities. Pretty awkward.
Well, I think it's quite good though, because they spend a mana doing nothing on our card that effectively does nothing. So we jam Doomsday. I think, yeah, they force, we force back, and it resolves. They pitch Narset.
Yeah.
So I've got a pretty stock way of pile building against sort of dirtly blue decks, which involves basically making sure I've got Cavern, Island, Oracle in some form. Would you go for an Ideas Unbound pile here, even in the sort of face of potential Narset effects, or would you take it a bit slower?
I think it's fine. The big problem would be Narset as much as Hull Breacher, because if they Hull Breacher in response to your Ideas Unbound, they untap with like 6 mana or something, and it's kind of ridiculous.
And a 3 power creature as well. That's the bit that hurts the most, I think.
Yeah, I think what makes Ideas Unbound kind of nice here is that you're pretty much putting them on a track to actually hit their Narset or whatever. But even if they do, you'll just draw the Ideas Unbound, pass. They pass back to you, and then you play your fetch, crack it for an island, and play a Thassa's Oracle with 2 cards, so that, you know, threatens lethal. And then what your pile could look like is something like Ideas Unbound. This isn't the order it would be in, this is just the cards that it contains. It could be like, you know, Ideas Unbound, Island, Cavern, Oracle, Pact, or something like that. So if you want to slow draw it, you can just put together like Cavern, Oracle with Pact to cover Dress Down or something.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, you can put them to the test with like Ideas Unbound into Cavern, Oracle with Pact backup, and if they do hit the Narset, you do have the slow draw option depending on how fast or slow you want to take it.
So, unfortunately for us, they don't have Narset, they have Days Undoing here.
That just kills you on the spot.
It just kills me on the spot, yeah. I do some quick counting.
The only way we could have played around that would have been to hold our pedals. We would have had an 8th card to put in response to Days Undoing. So we did get punished a lot for playing that pedal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I said, you know, the petal, playing that petal out didn't really matter, but it turns out it did.
Yeah, I don't think there was a particular reason to have played it. Having it set there, post Doomsday, I don't think would have made like a huge difference either. It would have made our Ideas Unbound better if we had piled it as well.
Yep. So here, I'm not actually too familiar with how the Jeskai Undoing decks are building themselves these days, so just going off base, I almost brought in my Rebs and forgot the red source. I don't know if you saw that. Quick, hasty...
yeah, that would not have been ideal.
So, I do actually bring the Massacre in because quite often the white X control decks have annoying tools like Meddling Mage or Canonist or similar things like that. And it's quite nice to have a tutorable way to deal with those.
Also kills Hull Breacher.
Also kills Hull Breacher, yeah.
I think think this is also a pretty good matchup for second Oracle, because you can do things like play through Dress Down by just running runner Oracles. The pile of ideas Unbound into Wraith Oracle Cavern with another Oracle after that is pretty good, because if they try to remove the Oracle, you can just cycle into the second one and then you're at 0 cards, and if they Dress Down in response to the ideas, you just let it go and draw the second Oracle. I guess another minor thing we could have considered is that against these slower decks, I think maybe it would have been better to have Watery Grave over a Lotus Petal. There's no Doomsday pile that ever needs all 4 petals.
Yeah. Okay. So this hand, I think, is a prime example of the awkwardness of the splash here.
Right.
Because these Pyroblast, really powerful tool in the matchup. However, with just 1 land source and no ritual in hand, we are really not incentivized to find that Volk if we can help it.
Right. You're asking your Ponder to find like Underground Sea plus Dark Red. I guess you'd want your Ponder to find land 2 anyway for this brainstorm. I'm not like a Pyroblast gamer, so I don't necessarily know how highly you're supposed to value these against the Jeskai deck.
Yeah.
So if you said you kept this, I could say like, yeah, I understand that. I feel like it'd be pretty justifiable to mulligan this though, because you're far away from a fast Doomsday. You're holding duplicate Pyroblasts, which you can't even use in the same stack because you only have 1 Volcanic. I could go either way on this, but I think I am not like experienced enough playing Pyroblast to know for sure which it would be. I'm leaning to mulligan though, because this just doesn't cast a Doomsday very well.
Okay, interesting. I think I keep this because it is a reasonable hand, if not...
Yeah, it's also Pyroblast in the Pyroblast matchup, which, you know, for science at least, I do kind of want to see how this plans out.
And, yeah, so we have the option to fetch the Volk straight up, but I do elect to get the Underground Sea, because, as you say, that finds our win condition.
Interesting.
But this is I think the problem with this hand is it's a very fair hand, and we are not playing a fair deck.
We shuffle this? I feel like we're supposed to shuffle this. None of those cards look particularly good, and none of them are red sources either, so we don't, like you mentioned, we don't really have any like contextually unfair cards in this hand.
Yeah. And actually, it's kind of maybe shows a reason why maybe we should have fetched the Volk to begin with, because we have 4 Underground Seas in our deck and only 1 Volk, so we're definitely more likely to find a sea naturally.
Right. I think maybe the bigger issue here is that we didn't shuffle this Ponder, though. I don't know that it was a keep. It just didn't seem to be that many compelling cards. Like this keep, like you can just pick up. Yeah, you can just pick up the Delta here. Now do you just abandon your Pyroblast so you can get your 3rd Underground Sea?
I think so, kind of because you've got this Duress, so you can Delta fetch Sea, Duress. Although,
okay.
I'm not...
You know, I like where we ended up here if we just fetch a Vault, because with the Preordain, you can actually kind of have it all, where if you Preordain it with Dark Rit, you can Dark Rit into Doomsday with Pyro backup and Force backup, and then you can come back later on to Duress.
So
if we fetch the Vault here, I could understand it. If we fetch an Underground Sea here, I think that's fine. Like, I don't think either of these paths are bad, but I think if you're trying to play the Pyroblast deck, maybe just sitting back with a Pyroblast here would have been better.
Yeah. The thing I don't like about this line that I've just taken, kind of looking back, is I've kind of tried to go half and half, and I think I much would have preferred to see me commit to either keeping Pyroblast or getting rid of both of them. And watching back, I think I maybe would have said get rid of both of them, especially with me fetching the sea and going for this Duress.
Yeah, with you fetching this sea, I don't know that you... Like, I don't know what's about to happen here, but I'd be really surprised if you ever end up casting this Pyroblast without, like, taking special pains to do so with the Doomsday.
Yeah, I think keeping because we had a Consider in hand, I think keeping the Consider would be much better because it pitches to Force and even in the face of Narset, it digs 2 cards.
Right, so, yeah, maybe we should have just jumped off the red splash entirely. Well, also, like, embarrassingly enough, the opponent's brainstorming against our discard spell, and we can't cast this Pyroblast.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of good cards from the opponent here. What would you like to see taken?
I think you take the Force of Negation. Dress Down's annoying, but Dress Down costs like actual mana to use 100% of the time. You can also, it's also, you know, your Pyroblast is good against it because you can. The Force of Negation will stop like your Ideas Unbound, but if Ideas Unbound and then they Dress Down in response, you can just Pyroblast that instead. So it kind of works either way, but Force of Negation just does more for them. I think if they're hiding stuff on top, they're maybe hiding like an effectual blue card of some sort, like a Narset or a Hull Breacher. And if they spend their mana on that, they can't spend their mana on Dress Down, whereas they never don't have Force of Negation open.
Yeah. And if they do spend 3 mana on a card like that, we've got this Daze to kind of help punish that.
Yeah.
So, opponent does get to 3 mana, but they seem to just be cantripping a little bit. They're probably not willing to sort of take themselves off Dress Down, assuming they haven't found another Force effect.
A really great time for us to draw our Volcanic Island.
We don't, but we click go anyway. And yeah, this just gets really awkward. So they do find the Force, they pitch the Shark Typhoon, and I'm also not happy with my decision here with what to pitch. So we've got 2 Dazes that currently don't do anything unless they specifically have Dress Down cast with, you know, only 1 mana available to them. We know they've got a 4th land in hand in that Prismatic Vista, and so I think I'd rather have the Preordain to, you know, dig through the pile or help us along watching this back, rather than these 2 days.
I think pitching Preordain is kind of interesting because with double Daze, if they play their land 4, because they exiled the Shark Typhoon to the Force, right?
Yeah.
Their hand is Dress Down Vista, they played the Ponder, and so they have 2 unknowns that we don't know. The most, like, difficult to play through unknowns that they could have would all be 3-drops, right? So if they go Vista 3-drop, you can at least double Daze and hold on through that.
But at the same time, all the 3-drops that they have, we can deal with by just drawing a Volk and Pyroblasting.
I suppose, but it looks like we don't have a Volk in our pile.
No. And again, this goes back to why I'm not happy sort of watching this back with the choice to keep one of the Pyroblasts off that Brainstorm. I think I definitely... The
Pyroblasts would have been fine if you didn't immediately duress them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to restate like another point, we had the combination of Preordain possibly finding Darkrit, so we could have like held up our Vault to represent the Pyroblast, and then we could Preordain, find the Darkrit using the Vault if you wanted to do Duress and then Darkrit Brainstorm, or you could have just held your C and your Vault open and led with Duress and just see what happens, because you can Pyroblast the Brainstorm, for instance.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is probably the game I'm the least happy with in the lead.
Right. This is a very awkward spot because we know they have the dress down and we didn't bring in our second Oracle. So, in like a weird way, I feel like the only versions of this game where we win, not to say we can, I don't even know that we're unfavored, but we kind of sorta are relying on the opponent messing up sense and like hitting mana when they shouldn't. Because if they just sit back on this dress down, we're hard pressed to beat it. And then they can flash in a clock. Okay, but here they go committing, and your double days here would actually work.
Yeah. And I can't remember why I didn't daze that here. So they've taken themselves off dress down mana. We know that our next two cards that we can draw are Cycler, right? Street Wraith into Edge. I think Oracle's the third card down.
Right, and then we run into this issue where we have to Pyroblast the dress down, but I think the pedal's like fairly far down in our list.
Yeah,
so we're passing a good number of turns. If this Narset digs for enough answers for our Pyroblast, we've actually lost. And I don't know if these dazes are doing anything for us at this point.
They're not. So I think at this point, what we probably should be doing is just going, right, hope they don't have the Pyroblast, or that they take the bait of paying for one of the dazes. Well, actually, even if they have the Pyroblast, the other daze gets it. Yeah, so what I should do here is just double daze, well, dazed Narset. If they let daze resolve, good. Untap, cycle, land, cast Oracle, have daze protecting it. Or if, you know, they pay for it, then daze again on Narset. Same thing, Oracle, cycle, Oracle. So yeah, this here is a big misplay, I think. At least that's assuming I put the Oracle third.
Right, I'll admit I've forgotten the order of our pile, unfortunately. I am pretty sure the first two cards are recyclers, but I'm going to assume we have the good instinct to put Oracle like slot 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, the opponent here just hitting their land drops, making our dazes look very embarrassing. There is like, gosh, I remember when I started playing this deck, like. This was like February 2021 or something. I just picked up like a Grixis list or something, or a bug list. I forget who. Like, I stole someone's deck list to get started. I just forgot if it was like Ethan's or Brandon's. Like, one of the ways I could tell I just wasn't good at this deck is that every hand I was looking at for like Doomsday just looked like a pile of shit. Like, I had all these like awkward dazes that weren't connecting. I had all these personal tutors that were always like turns too late or whatever. Like, when you don't know how to play this deck, it just feels bad and every hand looks bad. And so I can kind of tell that somewhere along the way, I think we messed up because like our hand looks like shit again.
Yeah,
like whenever the deck stops looking powerful, I can tell I did something wrong. Like, so when you're actually hitting the kind of like rhythm that this deck is supposed to hit, every hand looks like super dynamic and super powerful. And when you don't, it just looks like the worst collection of cards you've ever seen.
So the point I knew I had lost this game was when they untapped with Narset. And because Narset, well, I guess when they Narseted, because at that point we could then see they had found Force Negation, they found a Pyroblast, they have the dress down, so I'm dead. Because assuming they don't tap 5 mana for a Force of Will, we can't fight this dress down.
Yeah. We had a Dark Ray, we could at least cast the Street Wraith and start swinging.
Okay, I did in fact put the Oracle as the third card, as I should have. So, yeah, we threw away the winning line there.
Yeah.
But that's good to see, because I honestly hadn't seen that at all the first time. And that's why it's good to do these reviews, I think, because in the moment you can miss a lot of things. So this is now me just doing a Hail Mary, hoping that my opponent forgets that they have you know, cards that are relevant, taps out 1,000 mana for hardcast Fawn plus hardcast Dress Down plus I don't know what.
I mean, who knows? The opponent maybe have decided that there was a good time to Jace. Like, you know, it's, may as well play the game out.
Yeah, so our opponent Dress Down's here, we Pyroblast it. So, and here I'm not sure why I let it get into play. Because that just gives them a free draw card trigger that isn't helpful.
I mean, I guess it plays around Veil of Summer because you're not trying to counter Stress Down.
I don't know. Like, I was pretty aware that I was dead, and our opponent confirms it by pitch casting the Force of Negation. They don't get greedy. They do the right thing.
Well done, Jeskai player.
Yeah. So, on the draw, this is our 7.
Seems good.
Yeah, I mean, it's got Personal Tutor, it's got Protection, it's got 2/3 of the mana we need.
Yeah, the best quality about this hand actually is the 2 lands. The neat thing about that is that it lets you go Personal Tutor for Doomsday, and then you can try to preordain to fish for the Dark Crit, so then you can immediately go turn 2 Doomsday. Or, if you fail to find, you can evaluate what they do on their turn 1, and in this case turn 2, because we're on the draw, and see if you could settle for hitting land number 3 and just casting Doomsday off of that. So you'll have like a daze and 2 forces, or a daze and a force, fishing force. The awkward openers are always the ones where it's Personal Tutor and 1 land, because then you know you're not drawing a second land, and so does the opponent. Like, the number of times where I've gone, like, and Personal Tutor, and then the opponent just immediately snaps off the Wasteland, hoping to just get, like, the free win, is very obnoxious.
So, we see Caesar Synod, which I immediately think is 8 cast, and it's very swiftly followed by a Grindstone, which gets a bit spicy.
Well, okay, we don't have 2 Oracles, so yeah, maybe we do have to force that. It's kind of awkward.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, because just active Grindstone by itself is really quite tricky to... It's not impossible to navigate around, but as I said, this league was run late-ish at night after a workday, and I was in no mood to try and think around it and play those games.
With 2 Oracles, you can do something like Wraith, Edge, Oracle, Wraith, Oracle, which you can't beat with just a Grindstone, which, you know, at least gets you that far.
So, here's an excellent misplay, in my opinion, of the league. So, opponent untaps, drops Mopal, drops Saga, and then casts Emery. So, would you force the Emery here?
No Emery,
We know we've got Doomsday on top of the deck.
It's kind of tough because it's going to take us 2 turns, so if we end up forcing the Grindstone the second time around, they'll just replay it anyways. But we're so slow that the Saga finds a Grindstone as it is. Maybe it's actually just better EV to try and, like, force for their force, because it's taking us 2 turns. Let's have a preordain, so we could go, what is it, like, we go preordain with no force, then they play Grindstone, which gives them Metalcraft, and they'd have to hit a land drop to get a mill.
So the advantage of preordain if we don't force is we could use it to try and find a ritual.
Right. I feel like we're just too slow to force this, because we have to hit 2 land drops then. Like, I feel like we get stuck a lot of the time anyways under their Grindstone. We don't have a way to play around it. But I kind of like the idea of letting this Emery go.
I don't know. I think... So, I let it resolve, but I think I should have forced it because I should have forced it. Forced it because if I forced the grindstone on the first turn, why would I let repeated grindstones resolve on later turns, right?
Right. What the problem I feel like we'd be running into is that if you force this, then you're drawing a Doomsday, you're going land, go, they tick Saga up to 2, you play Doomsday, go, they tick Saga, go and get Grindstone, and then they can mill you immediately. Because they'll have Metalcraft, a floating mana off of the Saga, and then the Seed of Refine on. So you get milled no matter what. So I feel like we're kind of stuck here, whereas by not forcing, we have the preordain, which maybe gives you a chance to get like a turn ahead. Because if they Emery to cast the Grindstone, the Saga can't like float mana and put a Grindstone into play. The Saga's at 2, so it's just casting the Grindstone, and they could conceivably not hit a 3rd mana.
Yeah.
It's asking a lot, right? Like, I know you're just asking their hand to like not have a force, not have more mana, but I feel like this is the path that probably wins you the most games.
So this is my realization about, why didn't I force Emery? Highlighting it. And they actually milled some interesting cards with the Emery. They milled Great Furnace, Ancient Tomb, Gamble.
Well, I guess that kind of works if you're playing all the Welders and Engineers.
I have to say, I did like their list. It was quite spicy. And here is another point, I think, on why I still think it was correct to force the Emery, is because I've got this preordain now.
If you weren't preordained, then yeah, you probably should have forced the Emery.
Yeah.
I like letting the Emery resolve and trying to preordain your way into stealing this game.
Okay.
But not forcing and not preordaining is probably like the worst path we could have picked, unfortunately. Now we're hoping to rip a Darkrit off the top, Darkrit Doomsday, preordain into Brainstorm, and hope the opponent just like completely forgets what their cards do or just doesn't have like this game is still winnable, but you need like a very specific hit, and it has we just need Dark Ritual. Basically, I just always want Dark Ritual. I feel like that's been a pretty consistent theme of my narration here. Oh, that's really bad.
Yeah.
You're the worst.
So, yeah, this makes things awkward.
I guess you don't have to spoil it, but do they have Echo Vans on top of like all this other stuff?
I don't
they
think
have
they
Gamble.
do.
It just occurred to me now. They have Gamble and they have LEDs. This would be really fun.
They don't. I'm not sure they have Echo, but they do run the new Containment Construct card, the 2/1 for 2 that people are trying out with Artificer's Intuition. The one where every time you discard a card, it exiles and you can cast it.
No idea what that card is.
Okay, well we'll see. Spoiler alert, we'll see it in a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, their list was actually sweet.
When you say like a card people combo with artifacts, my brain just like auto completes with like Fleet Wheel Daredevil or whatever.
What the black one that you can loop with? Or is
I think
that's
it's
Opal Chase Daredevil.
That's what it is. I think it's the one that also gets played in the food deck in Modern.
So our opponent tanks quite a bit on what they want to do this turn, which is good for me because I have no idea.
I guess our best hope is that they're so thirsty for constructs that they just forget that Grindstone is a hard check against us.
Yeah, so they start tapping mana. skip ahead a bit. So they start tapping mana, and I'm like, yes, they're not casting Grindstone from their graveyard. This is good. And then they start untapping mana, tapping mana, and the Painter's Sermon comes down.
Yeah, that's a good card. They also have not used their land drop, so we could just get.
Yep. So you can see the gears in my head just whirring again on what can I do here.
I like how we let this go because it still leaves us with the possibility of drawing the Dark Rit.
It's just me appreciating the white borders that have been given to everything. So here I think I'm slightly praying that our opponent cracks LED to try and cast something from their graveyard, something being Grindstone, but our opponent is smarter than that and knows that, you know, if nothing else, as long as they untap, they've got Saga available to fetch what they need.
Right. And we're just gonna draw Dark Rit, and then we're gonna Preordain into Brainstorm. We're gonna just hit him with the standard Brainstorm pile. Easy peasy.
So they do in fact go for it.
Fine. That doesn't change anything. We just let this resolve and draw Dark Rit.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I do though. Unfortunately.
Tell me you force this. If you force this, you lose 100% of the time.
I know, but yeah, at this point, I definitely wasn't sort of thinking clearly. Probably, I don't know. I've got no excuse, but yeah. So here, as you say, quite rightly, I need to just let that go because I'm dead either which way. So I might as well give myself the opportunity, the better opportunity, to be able to.
Okay, it wasn't Dark Rit anyways.
Yeah. So here I should just scoop.
Yeah.
But I don't because there's the no. Why don't I? I'm trying to remember why don't I just scoop? Oh yeah, I don't scoop because I forget Urza Saga can find Grindstone and Emery can cast LED. So I'm like, there's an outside chance that they don't draw a third mana to activate.
They don't need the Emery. They'll just float a mana with Saga, and they'll have Metalcraft for Opal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're just super dead, unfortunately.
Okay, thankfully I do remember I do the maths and concede before they see my deck. So I'm not sure how to sideboard here because they're a slightly spicy blue-red painter list, whereby yes they have some blue cards that are annoying, but at the same time they also seem to have a lot of colourless and red cards that are annoying. So maybe these red blasts shouldn't come in because do they really hit enough? And Chain of Vapor should probably come in because that at least, you know, gets rid of something annoying.
You got Street Rates a lot.
Yeah, I do. Just because they're an easy hit.
I don't know that you're supposed to do that. I don't board Street Rates out in like any matchup at all ever. Yeah, I don't like. They're the freest and most flexible conversion you have because like edges have like a diminishing return, because at
Yeah.
a certain point you kind of like run out of lands. You can say like, well, don't you run out of life points? Sure. But when you cut your life in half with a Doomsday, it's usually like a 9, so you can cycle conceivably 4 Street Wraiths before you run out of life. Whereas if you're trying to like rush a fast Doomsday, you have at most 2 lands to work with for Edge of Autumns. But fundamentally, Street Wraiths make you super fast. They make you super consistent because you just you pile whatever you want into your deck, and you can draw into it immediately at any time without risking your lands or anything like that. I think the Street Wraiths are like super important in just about every matchup.
So I'm definitely not happy with the boarding there. I think I'd change that very much. But I am very happy with this 7.
If you are running more than 2 Street Wraiths in your main, you can justify siding out the Street Wraiths in excess of 2 against Black-Red. That's like the one time I would do it, because they will animate dead your Street Wraiths and beat you to death, and it's really embarrassing. That's it, though. Every other time, keep all the Street Wraiths, even against Burn.
So, this 7, perfect. Well, almost perfect. It's got turn 2 Doomsday with Force Backup, which is not quite turn 1 Doomsday with Force Backup, but, it'll do. Opponent starts dropping artifacts. And here it is, the Containment Construct. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile it from your graveyard, and if you do, you may play that card this turn. So this card has some really cool interactions with, say, Gamble, with LED, with a lot of their deck, whereby they can get a lot of value off casting things. So I'm a little worried now, because this LED, in theory, can represent a lot of cards that can now be cast. Including like a Force Negation or a Flusterstorm. Or a Red Elemental Blast. Not that, I'd expect them to dump their entire hand on my turn, even if they could cast them, but it is now an extra thing I have to kind of think about in the equation. So power-wise, we're quite lucky insofar as we've got this fetch that's available to us. And double Oracle now in the deck. So we can look to, doing something like put Oracle on top, Oracle on bottom. And work it from that ways.
So like, the piler would probably be something like Island Oracle, Cavern Oracle, Wraith.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
There.
Oh, no. I thought that was what it was going to be, but looks like Past Me had second thoughts. Okay, so I've done Wraith, Oracle, Cavern, Island. So this means now, if they drop Grindstone and activate it immediately, we mill Wraith, Oracle, draw Oracle for turn. But then the awkwardness comes from if they drop Grindstone pass, assuming that we aren't able to force it, and then we draw Wraith for turn, And then if we were to cycle Wraith, they could grindstone us on Oracle in response unless we fetch. But even then, they'd do that on our turn, so they could just untap, grindstone us again for the rest.
Right. So if they grindstone in response, you have to crack to fetch the island, and then you have like a 1 in 3 chance of losing if your cavern ended up as the last card. But I do like how we had the kind of long-term planning here to leave the fetch uncracked because we went in Darker Doomsday, because it does give you the opportunity to thin out the deck like this, which is relevant in these sort of like situations.
Yeah. So they drop the Saga, and it's interesting because they do actually, one thing that we haven't sort of discussed. Oh yeah, they dropped Dak Faden. Again, another card that works really well with Containment Construct.
I suppose so. It's also like a very interesting thing to run into against the Doomsday deck.
So I do elect to force it here because this way, if they want to Reb, they have to crack this LED to do it. And I really want to try and cast an Oracle this turn.
Yeah. So I guess just to make sure that I understand this right, the way it would work is they discard their hand to LED. The construct triggers, they would exile the Pyro among the 3 cards they discard and then cast it. Is that basically how this works?
Yeah, correct. And then they would be able to cast the Pyro off the LED mana. Thankfully, they didn't have it. Yeah, I think looking back, I'd probably not bother with the Rebs, so I'd keep in, obviously, Watergrave over Volk. I'd bring in... What would I take?
Isn't that bad against these painter-type decks, because if you pitch cast a card and then you get Pyroblasted, you know, it's pretty bad. Thoughtseize also hits both halves of their combo. I don't know how much I like Daze in particular against Saga decks, because a lot of the Saga play patterns are just, I'm going to play this land that produces a generic mana and then pass back to you. So having a counter spell that gets stopped by paying a generic mana, you know, that doesn't line up very well. I think that was one of the like driving factors to the like 0 days build that came up when Jeskai Agaman was a thing, because like it was a Jeskai deck, sure, but a lot of its openings would just be like, oh, here's a Saga that's just kind of here. So it made all the bases look particularly terrible, not even considering that Ragavan would just make like 8 treasures over the course of a game or something.
Yeah, or they'd do something like, you know, drop, say against 8 casts, like Bauble, Mopal, Saga, cast Emery, and your Daze is looking very silly.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts on this 7?
I think this is fine. It's the same thing we came back to, where having the 2 lands makes the Personal Tutor very good. We set up the Doomsday, and then we have 2 Ponders to try and look for Dark Rit, and if we miss, all we need to do is hit land 3.
Yeah.
What you can also do, if the opponent is just like camping on a red source and very obviously representing a Pyroblast, you have 2 choices on how you want to go about it. You can either go runner, ponder, and just, you know, punch for the Pyroblast that way and just cast black spells for the rest of the game. Or you can go in with the Thoughtseize and, you know, evaluate from there whether you want to ponder, or just, you know, wait and see if your draw step will just give you land 3 incidentally.
Yeah.
If you hit land 3, you can put your opponent in this weird position where, like, if you ponder, they maybe don't want to pyroblast because they're like suspicious that you'll use that as the bait and then just go in with an oracle. But if they let the ponder resolve, you just dig for cavern faster because you're going through the deck.
So I actually mulligan this hand because in my mind I don't think it's quick enough. I don't think it's quick enough, and I don't think it's got enough resiliency against the painter deck. So I'm really wanting to find Dark Grit Doomsday as quickly as possible.
I don't know that I agree with that. If you're really scared of like a fast opening, I don't think painter like turn ones people that often or anything. But if you're
it's not about the fast opening of the painter servant turn one combo. It's about they've got grindstone in their deck, they've got LED in their deck. So
what I'm getting at is that if you're really afraid of them doing something effectual on their turn one, you had other ways you could have played that 7. Like you could just ponder first and pick up like a Daze or a Force, or you could just open on Thoughtseize. Like that's fine too.
Yeah. And I guess with PT and Ponder ×2, you've got a good chance to find that Dark Grit after you've found the Doomsday.
Yeah. There's also like weird permutations of like using the Edge of Autumn in case your draw step is a Dark Grit. I don't know if that's necessarily good, but it's an interesting timing push because the opponent doesn't necessarily have infinite mana if they didn't open with an LED.
Yeah. Okay, but so we do elect a mulligan, and this is the 6 we're given. What do you think on this?
I mean, the 6 is probably fine. I don't like it as much as our 7 because the island is not as good of a 2-land combination as the 2 underground seeds was. Because now our ponder basically has to find the Dark Grit if we want the turn 2 Doomsday. Yeah. I would keep it as 6 and like probably bottom the LED or something.
Yeah.
It's like we don't have a way to do personal. Well, I guess if you really wanted to, you could personal tutor on turn 2 and then ponder cracking the LED. But then you basically lose the Daze and the Force, so you're playing with like a 4-card hand or something. Yeah. That's really bad. Yeah.
So yeah, we do keep the 6, bottom the LED, and the idea is Misty, find C, PT for Doomsday, and then untap Island, ponder off Island, try and find Dark Ritual, and hopefully Ritual Doomsday. Drops 2.
It would be a hell of a time for them to reveal that they've had Chalice in their deck all along.
That would be a spicy inclusion. But they do indeed just have Grindstone plus, I don't know, plus Daze mana, plus whatever, and they follow it with Petal, Mox Opal. And here we get max punished if they have like an Emery or something.
Right. 2 Oracles, post forward, and Chain of Vapor also. I'm not even sure if you have to / want to force just like a Grindstone opener.
However, as it turns out, they would have had the mana to be able to activate it this turn, but I guess we haven't PT'd for Doomsday yet this turn, so that doesn't matter.
Right.
So needles come down, the opponent rolls the dice on the fetch that they want to choose, and they go for Tarn, which is a miss. And again, Faithless Looting, another card that combos really well with that containment construct. And we find a Brainstorm, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So I like to brainstorm here. Obviously, probably fixating a little bit too much on this fetch. But would you prefer pondering to try and get that extra look?
Yeah. Hitting the dark red here is really important. Also, brainstorm post Doomsday does a lot more than ponder post Doomsday.
Yeah. So I think, ponder's probably correct there. And we unfortunately miss. But this does mean that we can now try and Misty, crack, ponder, try and find ritual. Although the basic island is now looking real awkward.
Yeah. Once we committed to the island, we, effectively committed to having dark red as part of our game plan. So I think the ponder here was really important. There's some interesting stuff that you can do with a consider. I'm just kind of brainstorming here, where you can play around them grindstoning or not by setting up a pile where, like, if they mill, they take you to an oracle, and if they don't mill you, then you choose to surveil, and now you're deep enough into a pile that you draw an oracle and play it. I think that's kind of neat. I don't know if that'll ever actually happen in a game, but that's a fun use case for consider.
Yeah, so I think here I'm trying to work out whether consider plus black, third black source is worthwhile.
I think we were supposed to shuffle that.
I think we were supposed to shuffle, I'd agree.
Yeah, I think dark red or petal would have been great pickups because we're waiting to next turn either way. So with petal, at least we can get to triple black. But I don't think consider really does enough for us. What I do like about these games that we're going over, though, is that the losses aren't like super decisive, and it's usually like small micro decisions that we made that end up having like cascading effects later on. Like, there's a lot of games you lose where it's just like, okay, the Delver player opened like 2 Wastelands, or like the 4C player had like 2 Endurance, 2 Power Blasts, and you're just like, okay, like, yes,
but
you can maybe try
that game where we lost because we played a Lotus Petal and didn't have it available for Days Undoing, that's an interesting scenario.
Right, or like the how do you play out your lands like 2 turns later to like make your Pyroblast effectual and all that. I think those are like those are more interesting, and the patterns are more nuanced. Like, it's really easy to tell people like, I don't know, try not to get Wasteland out of the game, or like try to force the Force of Wills when you would lose if your spell doesn't resolve. But these patterns are more interesting here. We hold in this consider for.
Yeah, I think by this point I'm kind of resigned to the fact I've likely lost this one, even despite sort of double Oracle Chain in deck, with them having sort of the double welder effects, plus Peter and Grindstone in the bin. They've got a lot of play available to them.
We are actually just dead next turn, right? Because they weld in 1 artifact, and then they can weld in the other half. Although, interestingly, I think they could grindstone us next turn, because they would put in the LED and the grindstone. So if we had like a deep analysis, we'd still lose.
Yeah, we don't have to.
I wonder if dark red actually gets us there.
Yeah.
We have 4 mana, so we could dark red, Doomsday, consider, mill, hit a cycler maybe, and then it's the same kind of dynamic where like we could make a pile where if they mill us, we don't surveil, and if they don't mill us, we do surveil, something like that. Like, the pile could be triple cycler, 2 oracles, and we just consider our way into it. Yeah, I think this is another game where if we drew the dark red, we maybe could have stolen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Here, I kind of know I'm dead.
Because we sided out all the street race.
So here I kind of know I'm dead because I'm just casting this Doomsday to see if there's anything I can think of that might save us.
Right.
But I think, yeah, there's no reason that we shouldn't lose this game right at this point.
True.
Just in case, we build a very odd pile, which is, I think, sandwiched oracles. So it's Oracle Cycler, Ponder, Cycler, Oracle.
Yeah, that seems fine.
Now, what I find amusing here is they don't immediately elect to Goblin Engineer their construct away to get the Servant. So I'm wondering what they could be thinking about playing around.
That costs some mana, right? So they can't even mill you out anyway. So I think maybe what they're considering is if they should mill you here, untap, then mill you, or if they should just untap, put the Painter Serpent into play, and then kill you that way. I don't think they can, like, for sure kill you at this moment. Yeah, okay. Like, as well. Wasn't there supposed to be a ponder there?
Ponder's in the middle.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think, yeah, maybe Ponder on top's correct.
Starting to see why the opponent thought it would take them 10 minutes to click through Artificer's Intuition.
Yeah, the clock disparity of this match was interesting.
Yep, okay. Opponent eventually found Painter Servant.
I wonder if they were playing around maybe the cheeky Emrakul plan in the board.
Yeah.
Because okay, they do finally go for it.
I think if they were really scared of Emrakul, the issue we'd run into is that at any given point we're always just shuffling back like 5 or 6 cards, so we're never close to actually winning ourselves. So they could just keep trapping us like that and just swinging for like 3 damage every turn.
Yeah.
Then if we ever draw the Emrakul, we just die. So.
Yeah. So we're currently 2-2. Go into the 5th and final match. We're on the draw against someone who has a name that sounds like they might be a control player, but everyone knows that Modo names aren't necessarily the best judge of character. So we see this 7. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this has like the problem of it's only personal tutor in one land, right? You can actually find a Doomsday and a Dark Grit. I guess you have a Street Wraith, so you could
We've got 2 draws, because we've got Street Wraith plus we're on the draw here.
Kind of close, but I just don't like it. The Ideas Unbound isn't that great either. These double dazes are kind of weird because since we're so constrained on land drops, we also don't. I feel like I would mulligan it, but I would want to make this hand work and just kind of like be sad that I probably can't.
So you can see I went to the mulligan button and had maybe a little think, because like you said before, the dazes actually do quite a lot of work they can do quite a lot of work with a low mana hand, because they could let you rebuy that land. But at the same time, if your opponent just goes wasteland you go, then you're kind of a bit buggered.
Yeah, I think the thing for me that pushes me over the edge to mulligan this is just that we're holding this like weird Ideas Unbound that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, so it's basically a 6.
We're working hard to make a 6 work, so you may as well just take the 6. There's a world where we just hit land 2 among these second draws, or these, our draw step and the Wraith, and that's probably fine though.
Yeah, I think
if we don't hit, I would seriously consider preordainin, as like anemic as that seems.
Yeah.
Cool, we nailed it.
Yeah, we do get the C as we drew it up. So I always cycle Street Wraith, especially in game 1s, just to see what we get, if that influences our decision. Awkwardly, it's another Personal Tutor. But I'm pretty much just going to find a Doomsday here. And similarly to sort of one of the games earlier, our opponent has gone sort of basic island, now basic plains, and they look to be playing some sort of control deck, likely that Jeskai pile again.
It's a shame no one ever put Temporal Mastery into the Personal Tutor shell. I feel like there's a big missed opportunity there. I don't like this Thoughtseize keep.
Was that you do or you don't?
I do not. We needed a 3rd mana, and if you really wanted a Thoughtseize, you have a Personal Tutor to find one if we bottom the Seas and hit our 3rd mana. Like, if we bottom this Thoughtseize, for instance, and we draw like a Dark Grit, that'd be the ideal, because then you can spend your 2nd mana Personal Tutoring here, pick up a Thoughtseize, go in next turn, Thoughtseize, Dark Grit Doomsday.
Yeah. So our opponent does seem to be on the Jeskai deck. Again, they had both Narset and Hull Breacher in hand, so we take the Hull Breacher.
Yep. I guess if there's a through line in my commentary here, it's just that you always want Dark Grit Doomsday. I will very aggressively bottom all kinds of cards, even ones that seem really good, like Forcivals and Thoughtseizes, because I just want that initial game plan. You can Ideas Unbound here, and I don't even think it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, cycling Ideas Unbound is one option. The other choice, the thing I went for was actually grab Edge of Autumn with this Personal Tutor, because this gives a bit more help post Doomsday if it manages to resolve.
That's fair, yeah. One of the things that I would have liked about playing Ideas Unbound is that what we could do is try to dig for a Force of Will.
Yep.
Or alternatively, a Dark Grit, because if we have to daze something on their next turn, like if they tap out for like a Jace or something, what we can do at least is daze and then come back later with Dark Grit Doomsday. And
here is yet another appeal to wizards to print us Dark Ritual but sorcery speed, because then in that instance we can Personal Tutor for slow Dark Ritual and be sitting pretty on the next turn.
Yeah, I mean, like 1 mana add 2 black would probably also be like good enough. I think Bubbling Muck doesn't quite do it because on turn 2 you only have 2 lands, so you spend 1 mana to actually get it to work, and then you only make 2 black. It's really sad. Remember, I think I did like some consideration of that over like the nth Cavalry, because both of those are like net 1 black.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the whole reason you want the Cavalry is so you can open on island. So if you go like island Personal Tutor for Bubbling Muck, and it's like, oh wait, I'm dumb. I'd be tapping my only swamp to do this.
And also then often gives you like one extra maybe wasted black as well, because obviously if you've got 2 lands that you're making black with off the Bubbling Muck, you're gonna have.
Well, that's fine. Like 4 black is awesome because you can go discard spell Doomsday or Doomsday playing around days. Like I hit threshold a few times and everyone's like, oh well, that's useless, but like, no, it's great. You don't get days. I love not getting days. If Reign of Filth was a sorcery, I'd seriously consider it. Even like with how bad sacrificing all your lands playing Doomsday would be.
Yeah, no, just a sorcery speed ritual effect would be incredibly powerful. So, pile here we make, because we've got Ideas of Bad in hand, which is really good, we can be very flexible with what we put in our pile, and we've actually got a Force of Will on top.
You know 1 card, right? The opponent played the island we've seen.
Yeah. So we now have Force of Will for if they had drawn another Hull Breacher, for example.
I would love it if the opponent like hard cast a Force, and then we just get to use it or something.
Yeah, and pile goes out as we drew it up. So, very similar boarding to that game, what's it, match 3, I think. Although, as you said, maybe we should be bringing in the second Oracle.
Yeah. Do you side pack out against control decks?
It depends on what sort of control deck it is. If it's like a green-based one, I won't, because they run endurance and stuff. If it's against like a Grixis-based one or a Jeskai-based one, I'm 50-50 on it, because it can be really good against things like Dress Down and stuff, but it can also be really awkward. Ooh.
Interesting. I think against Grixis, I could see not wanting a Pact of Negation, because I mean, like, you get thoughts used or whatever. What are you going to do? Pact it, right? But against the Jeskai deck, I think the Pact is really solid because it's good against the Dress Downs, which are kind of like, you know, endurance-esque effects. It can also just stop their Lashed In Hull Breacher on your own turn. But more relevantly, like even against a Pyroblast, you're at least trading up on mana against them, which can be like an interesting constraint. Like you're leaving in dazes, for instance. So I think like you can't say I'm not trying to play the mana axis against them when you're leaving in dazes. So Pact also.
I do think I leave in daze too often as a general consideration against a lot of decks. So that's probably something I need to sort of work on in terms of working out when I really actually need them and when I'm just seeing them as a crutch.
My hot take is that you don't even need 4, like, at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's been quite a few people who've been trying out lists with, you know, obviously, you know, 0 days, but even going 1, 2, 3 days, which, you know, daze is a very powerful spell, because if your opponent sees a daze, even if you've only got the 1, or if you take them out post-board, they still need to think of it as a card. Right.
I don't like going down to exactly 0 days, because I think the value of having 1 is just way too high, or just, well, not even 1, but like a non-zero number is just way too high.
Yeah.
But I think 4 has been harder and harder to justify as the format has matured and gotten more used to Doomsday, like in general. Also, there's just a lot of decks where Daze just isn't particularly good. Like, it's not good against lands, it's not good against elves, it's not good against any of these Mox Opal piles. You know, Dazes have historically underperformed against control because they just hit a bunch of land drops. like days is good, or days or peak day, right? Like 4 days is really good in matchups where you're already super favored. Like 4 days is great against like Death and Taxes.
Yeah,
but,
Death and Taxes, Moon Stompy, that sort of thing.
I don't even know that I like days against Moonstomp because it's important to have your lands on the table.
Yeah. Okay. So what are your thoughts on this 7?
It is a turn 2 Doomsday, and we are on the draw, so
it's a turn 1 Doomsday.
Oh, my bar of like turn 2 Doomsday or faster, right? Turn 1 gets us in that range.
Sure.
We are on the draw, so like lands are a good pickup because you could be patient and like hit the Thoughtseize. Rituals are fine because you can hit the Thoughtseize. Blue cards are fine because you have a Force of Will.
Yeah.
And I guess you could like run out of Doomsday, get it countered, and then just hope to rip Darkrit so that you can cast the second Doomsday.
Yeah.
So this hand looks janky, but I think it's a keep.
Yeah, and I did in fact keep it. Against a control deck, worst case scenario I think to me is if they go like Island Go, because the card that pops into my head as the biggest fear factor I have is Flusterstorm.
You have the Thoughtseize for that.
Yeah, and we do draw the Ritual. So what I do here is I fetch the C and Thoughtseize off the C, not wanting to commit the petals in case it all goes wrong. And they did in fact have a Flusterstorm in hand.
Oh, that seems so greedy.
So I have to read the Wandering Emperor here. It's not relevant.
So, minor thing I think here is that I think we should have taken the Brainstorm instead of the Flusterstorm.
Okay,
because
yeah.
this is the one turn where their Flusterstorm is going to be playable. I think the pile you built here is like double Oracle Cavern Cyclers because we can take our 2 draws faster than they can represent a Hull Breacher.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I don't think we have to cast instants or sorceries. So them not being able to brainstorm and fix their hand of like Wandering Emperor, Flusterstorm, or whatever would have been really
stuff. Yeah.
Right. Like their hand's just too slow and doesn't have enough effectual cards after this point. So taking the brainstorm that would have let them fix it, I think wins us more games.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's very valid. So Doomsday, of course, resolves. So we've got to work out what sort of pile we want to do. Again,
Hey, where's our second Oracle?
We didn't bring it in. Remember, I said it was similar to the match 3 where we didn't bring it in.
Oh, see, this is why I have it in the main deck, so I never forget it.
But yeah, do you know what? I'm actually, after sort of, doing this review, I'm actually very open to maybe going -1 days at the second Oracle main and maybe trying around with that. Because I do bring, this sort of set of matches aside, I do bring it in a lot, like a lot. So it's definitely at the territory where maybe I should just be thinking it should be in the main anyway. And here's another great example of why these Rebs are maybe a trap again. Because we've got this petal that can let us cast this Reb that we're putting in the pile, but other than like a dress down, what do we need the Reb for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we did at least take the Fluster, so your Reb is playable. So of the direction you wanted to go in, this at least makes sense. Like, this is coherent. I understand what we're doing. Could this island just be the vault then, I guess?
It could, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, I honestly don't know, do they play Wasteland, these Jeskai piles?
The Jeskai ones do. 4C does, because they're green and have life from below, but I don't think Jeskai has Wasteland. But yeah, I mean, I guess if we have one Oracle and we have to / want to try to keep it safe from
you can see me doing some interesting decision making now.
I feel like this game would have been very winnable if we'd taken the Brainstorm and had 2 Oracles, but in the world where we have 1 Oracle and we just really don't want to lose to top deck Dress Down, having a duress check, or maybe just having like a big pile of Pyroblast all at once between Volk and Petal maybe makes sense. If you could do, Cavern, Oracle, Volk, Reb, Pyroblast. So then if you draw like 3 of those, you can at least present Cavern, Oracle with Petal, Pyroblast backup, and then if they are slow enough that you get to take 2 more draws, you can also draw Volk and Reb.
Yeah.
So then you beat a Dress Down. And the thing about the Rebs is that, like, you know, it's fine if they have Flusters or whatever, because Flusters aren't good at enforcing their Dress Down, because you'll just point the next Reb at the original Dress Down, not at the Flusters, obviously. So, and then, okay, and here they are with their Brainstorm, right? They get to shuffle away their...
Yeah, like, they did find the Strand either off the draw step or the Brainstorm.
Right.
Didn't have before.
Like, I feel like you will hopefully race this Wandering Emperor.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing, obviously, we needed to make sure of, which we're fine on, was that we had the ability to have 8 cards across hand, graveyard, and library for a Day's Undoing.
Yeah.
And here, I basically built this pile with this exact idea in mind. So if they tap out of mana, I'm not going to play around them having Solidarity. I'm going to just do this pile where I Brainstorm into the ability to get Cavern and Oracle and just cast Oracle. And if they have Solidarity, they have Solidarity. If they left mana open, for example, if they left a Tundra open, or if they left a Volk open for, you know, Pyroblast, then what I'd probably do is leave up Brainstorm to cast in their turn, pass to their turn, Brainstorm at the end of their turn, and then set up to be able to Duress, Oracle, Cavern on the turn after.
That's good. Dress has the same kind of like weird problem that Ideas Unbound has, where they can dress down in response to it, though. So you can get caught in that if you don't have like sufficient room to maneuver. But what I think you could have done at that point, depending on how slow we're taking it, is you could go draw Street Wraith, pass, draw Brainstorm, pass, and then Brainstorm, so that when you're setting up Duress into Oracle is actually going to get like cycled into, or you at least have 1 more card in your deck, rather, so that if they dress down, that's fine. You're not going to deck out. You have 1 more draw step.
Yeah.
And then if they don't dress down, you can play it, and if they have removal, you just cycle and draw the last card. So I think what we would have had to have done is just make sure we can pair the Wraith and Oracle together.
But the advantage of what we would have been able to do if we had done the line of they leave up mana, so I wait until their turn to Brainstorm, I would still have 1 card left in my deck, because I'd Brainstorm at the end of their turn, go to 2 cards left, draw for turn, 1 card left, Duress them, so if they dress down then in response to the Duress, I can go, fine, that resolves, pass the turn again.
Right, I think we're on the same page here. I'm just saying, instead of just waiting to draw the Street Wraith, I say we wait to draw the Street Wraith and the Brainstorm. We wait even longer, I guess.
Yeah. So, 3-2, it's fine, you know. But as you said, I think this was an interesting league because it had a lot of decision points that, in hindsight, especially doing this review, I am not happy with, and a lot of interesting points that, in hindsight, I'm happy with, but I'm intrigued by their implications. So again, that Petal to do with the Day's Undoing type line, because I don't think I would ever, hand on heart, I couldn't ever say I'd be able to think of that as a potential line that far ahead.
Right. I think the dynamics on stuff like that are interesting. Like, it's usually okay to hold petals because there's like very little punish, but in situations like, oh, I want to play around Flusterstorm, that's when you actually have to like switch on the spot and be like, oh, I need to play out all this artifact mana like in advance.
So situations include things like Flusterstorm, as you said, Mindbreak Trap, the opponent dropping a Chalice on 0 against certain decks, or a Talia if they're going to mess up your mana calculations. It can, obviously the scenario we saw earlier, it wouldn't have had the majority of those things involved because it was a game one. So Flusterstorm would be the only real consideration in that sense. Yeah, no, I'm glad we sort of reviewed this league, especially with yourself, because going into this video and in the article, the report I wrote on the event I went to last weekend. I said, my main deck is pretty much locked in and I'm very happy with it, but actually doing this review, I'm now starting to open up and think about, well, actually, I could be changing some things and I would be quite content with those changes.
Yeah, I think it is just interesting to see what happens like when you play out the games, just what cards actually rise to the top in terms of like being really useful, because there's a bunch of cards that I mentioned this before when we were talking about like Wastelands or something that have like outsized impact. Like they don't just do what the card like text says, they actually like change the game dynamic. And just letting those cards like rise and fall on their own is just interesting to see. Like I mentioned before, that like Pact and Ideas Unbound compete for slots in my deck, and that's because like I wanted a card that's good against Endurance, because I play this deck and people play Endurances against me, so it makes sense to have a card that's good against that. But the more I played Pact of Negation, like in actual games, the more I was like, oh, this card just is really like underwhelming to me, because it's good in these situations where you can like camp out and have a lot of cards in hand and then just go in like on your own terms. But as soon as the opponent starts playing cards against you, it gets really weird, because when you Force of Will, you lose a lot of resources, so you just end up pitching the Pact of Negation a lot, or you have to Pact back and then Dark Ritual in your upkeep, and it gets very like weird to manage. I think Dazes have like as we saw in this league, Dazes have like a very underwhelming shelf life. And if there's any deck I think that really rewards like nuanced deck building or knowing like what you want and when you want it in a matchup, it's the deck that lets you stack the deck at like all points in the game. Like when you pick your draw step into the card that lets you pick all the draw steps you'll take for the rest of the game. I don't know, I don't think you could think of a better deck that lets you really get a lot of mileage out of how particularly you put your deck together in your sideboarding. There was this like, I think it was Canister, some streamer guy who like hates Legacy as a meme. And one of the things that he talked about was that the cantrips were really good because they give you the illusion of agency, because there's a lot of powerful cards in Legacy, and true, I'm not disputing that for a minute. That's why it's like fun, opinion me. But one of the things you get with Doomsday for sure is agency. You get to pick how every turn goes, and unless your opponent is getting like the top end RNG, they can't compete with your card quality. Once your Personal Tutors are solved, once your Doomsday is resolved. So I think it's okay to take a lot of losses in terms of like, okay, Personal Tutors like a quote -1, and like so is Doomsday, and so is your Force of Will or whatever. But you get to decide every single relevant card that's going to get played in the game, not in like a control deck sense, but in like here's a time scale where either I'm dead or the Oracle has been put on the stack. And in this, very short time scale, only so many cards can get played, and I got to pick all of mine, and I get to invalidate a bunch of the opponents. So, like deck building plays into that, because if you do all that work before you even sit down at the table, it's a lot easier to actually accomplish that in the games that you're like really playing.
Yeah, I'm so there's some cards that I'm sort of I started off really not liking. So actually, Pact of Negation, the one you brought up, is an excellent example of that. So I was really low on Pact to begin with, and then people started. This was around the time people were experimenting with 1 Pact main and then like 3 in the board as a one sort of toolbox mode to go against Delver. The idea being that they would optimize towards winning the same turn as much as possible. And it was from sort of that era where I said, okay, I will try 1 Pact. I will try 1 Pact in the main, and it overperformed because, as you say, endurance obviously is rampant in a number of decks, and there's a lot of instances where you do want to have that mana efficient, card efficient counter which just answers whatever you need on the go turn. But I think any more than 1 Pact and I wouldn't be happy, because they would be awkwardly situational dead draws, just force fodder or whatever. So as you say, I think having 1 Pact in the main is a very nice place to be, and it's where I like being, because that then lines up with a lot of the format. If, say, suddenly endurance was to be banned, I don't know why it would, but if it would, then obviously that slot gets reevaluated because it no longer has the impact in deck building that it had beforehand.
Yeah. One thing that I did like about 4 Pact is that it really did reward quality 7s, because Pact trades against every single one of Delver's points of interaction favorably. Against Fire Blast, you're coming up ahead on mana. Against Force of Will, you're coming up ahead on cards. Against Daze, they have a land drop limiting factor, whereas you have a hand size limiting factor, which they also have to match. So having a bunch of packs, I think, is kind of fine. There's also 4-color decks really can't beat if you go in with 2 or more Pact of Negations, 4C has to concede to that unless they're holding a one of Veil of Summer or something.
Yeah. I think my main issue with Pact is, as people have seen, I pass the turn a lot. I do very aggressive early Doomsday and then a slow pile, and obviously Pact doesn't play well with that thought process.
Yeah. The best triple Pact hands or whatever against Delver are the ones where you can also hit your 3 land drops, also go Darkroot Doomsday, and then just cycle into the Oracle or whatever. But if you're keeping your 7s, hitting 3 land drops, and opening with Darkroot and Doomsday, I feel like the Delver matchup's already probably gonna go pretty well for you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Right, so that about wraps it up, I think, for today. Do you have any final thoughts or final discussion points you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think I overshot our estimated time by a half hour, so my bad.
No. I mean, this has been really good. I was very interested with this league.
Something where you are, that's kind of late.
No, it's fine. So I was very interested with this league because although it wasn't the best performance, I knew there were a lot of interesting decision points within it. And so, I did think that maybe if the discussion was good, it would go on, and that's fine. But yeah, do you have any socials you want to promote at all? Are you on Twitter? Are you big on sort of anything like that?
No, I'm not on social media, and I don't make content. I'm very elusive like that, which is not productive at all for getting worked out.
That's fine. I mean, you do what you need to do, which is test. Grind on Modo, you perform really well in the challenges that you play in, and you are active in the Discord, so, you do contribute a lot to the community.
I swear at one point I'm gonna break my streak of inactivity on Twitch. It's been nearly 7 years. My channel enter thing is a screenshot from V3 of Modo, which is a visual experience. One of these days I will get around to streaming again.
Okay, well, if you throw me your Twitch handle over, I will put it in the link in the description below, so that people can wait for that fateful day where you boot it up again and see what happens. But yeah, so thank you very much. for joining in with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And everyone listening, this is the final video of this little section of Mythic Token, so you'll have to wait until they release the next one before I, do some more. So until next time, everyone stay safe, have a lovely time, and see you in the next one.